A proven solution to a sadly recurring problem. Breyland for a short story by Barry Wilmot. Gloria System, February 22nd, 1409, Old Terran Calendar. The terrorist attack on the Tiki Taki Club had been only one of three simultaneous attacks by Marxist elements against soft targets in the city. Fortunately, casualties were far lighter than they had any right to be. The attack on the nightclub had failed to the completely unexpected rigor with which the junior naval officers and asteroid miners who made up most of the clientele had fought back. The other two attacks failed mostly due to poor planning and the inexperience of the Marxist guerrillas. The final body count was somber: 47 civilians and 8 policemen killed. But Sang Sung was in many ways a military city, and the people took news in stride. They would weep for the fallen, but they had seen bad times before. Of the 30 estimated attackers, 24 were confirmed dead, and 2 more were captured. They would, for a brief moment, become the focus of an angry city's hate. Sensing a threat to his authority, the local High Justice acted quickly without waiting for a response from the system governor's office. The 2 terrorists were given a summary trial and sentenced to death under the martial law provisions of the Emergency Powers Act. Since they were communists, tradition demanded that they be put to death by being thrown out of a rotary wing aircraft. Not always the easiest thing to find, but thankfully an eccentric plantation owner was willing to lend the government the use of his aircraft. After all, it was simply part of his civic duty. Even better, the aircraft in question was an actual honest-to-God helicopter, not an auto-gyro or a tilt-rotor. High Justice was almost beside himself with joy. He would be able to honor the tradition after all. The governor, of course, was skeptical, but the High Justice was a very convincing man, and the evidence was cut and dry. They were Marxist terrorists caught in the act. Now convinced, the governor, a former policeman himself, suggested a refinement of the High Justice's plan. Instead of quietly throwing the terrorists out of the helicopter over the ocean, as was the normal practice, and letting the near sharks and razor squids make a brief meal of them, the governor wanted to make an example out of them. They would throw out the communists out of the helicopter directly over the main plaza in the middle of the commercial district. There was a nice, flat, concrete parking lot that would do nicely and produce a memorable visual effect in the process. The High Justice thought about this for a moment and pointed out that some of the food cart vendors who normally conducted business in an area might not be too fond of that idea. The governor did it for a minute, and so before suggesting that, it might be best to pay a slight compensation to the local vendors. He would later do so out of his own privy purse. But the Central Plaza was the place to make this happen. High Justice heartily agreed. It was time to send a message. Word of the planned operation spread rapidly throughout the soldiers and gendarmes of the demoralized garrison detachment, and was greeted with almost an ecstatic zeal. They were going to throw an actual pair of communists out of a real helicopter, just like in the old movies. Arrangements were made in record time. By midday the next day, Plaza was cleared by local police and a helicopter. A sleek, beautiful machine that seemed to mock the law of physics was airborne with its 2 special passengers. It was time for justice, or at least what passed for justice in Breyland's colonies. Unfortunately, the 2 terrorists were historically illiterate papaya farmers and did not seem to appreciate the fact that they were being thrown out of a real, authentic helicopter rather than one of the garrison's tilt rotors. The 2 gentlemen in question voiced their rigorous protests all the way down, and then suddenly stopped. Lucky one of the gendarmes had taken on his own initiative to attach a small recording device to the terrorists, so he and his mates could enjoy the comrades' in-flight conversation and that inevitable scream of terror just before impact. Those sound recordings passed through several hands in quick succession and were inadvertently leaked to the local media, just in time to be broadcast as part of the local nightly news. While the Breylanders were universally pleased with themselves, the response among the locals was admittedly mixed. Some of the wealthier citizens felt that the spectacle was an unnecessary piece of street theater and would have preferred to have the situation handled in a much more quiet and discreet manner. The local patriarch of the Western Orthodox Church was the sole voice condemning the executions as unchristian barbarism. This caused a great deal of agitation within the church rank and file, and the patriarch would later have to clarify that his objection was to the method of execution and denial of proper Christian burials, not to the executions themselves. Among the lower classes, there was a strange silent solidarity. Well, some of the other cities on the planet might harbor some lingering sympathy for the Marxist insurgents. Almost all of the permanent residents of San were children and grandchildren of refugees who had been forced out of their farms and villages during the initial uprising a generation ago. While no one openly cheered the execution, there was a certain amount of stoic satisfaction, and the only sympathy they felt was to the poor sanitation workers who had to clean up the resulting mess. And with that small bit of closure, the fine upstanding citizens of Sang returned to the ethanol-fueled joie le vivre that was their day-to-day lives.